Hello and welcome back, and today I want to do a very quick video, at least compared to my other ones, where I want to talk about DSM 7.2 and whether, if you are a budget end user, whether it's worth upgrading. Let's be honest, much like most of us when we see Windows 11 poking at us from the corner of the screen going, go on, download me. There's a lot of us out there that do not necessarily like big wholesale updates to our software that we use all the time, particularly when there's a graphical user interface involved there. And when it comes to Synology DSM 7.2 update, we talked about it a lot here on the channel, a lot of videos talked about the things we like, a few things we might change. But if you're a budget end user, and by budget, I'm going to roll that in to say the majority of users who are using older generation ARM-based processors, so not the DS223, but pretty much everything older than that, is it worth you upgrading to DSM 7.2 or sticking with DSM 7.1? Because it's worth remembering, DSM 7.1, DSM 7 and even DSM 6.2 is not game over yet. They're still going to be around for quite a while, and even if they're not going to get feature updates, they're going to get security updates for an exceptionally long time. Obviously that depends on the device you've gone for, on the age of it and the architecture, but still nonetheless, you don't have to upgrade to 7.2 because it's available. Now, what we're going to do in today's video, nice and simple, here in front of you, I have got the DS120j, the lowest ebb in the entire Synology hard drive NAS portfolio right now in the current available ones. Yes, you can go older gen, look at some of the SE boxes, but right now, in terms of available listed devices, this is the lowest ebb. And I'm pleased to say, it only bloody well supports DSM 7.2. If we're going for the info center, there was no obstruction. It just let me download DSM 7.2. More precisely, the release candidate right now, which is pretty much what you're going to see at final release. However, like a lot of the value series devices, when you look at the release notes for it, a lot of the release notes seem a bit ambiguous, and that's why there are some things that aren't actually available on one device or another, such as Worm. Because the first thing I want to get out of the way straight away, if you were thinking, cool, DSM 7.2, it's got a write once, read many functionality for those immutable backups that I'm going to be utilising, and a lovely little volume that's never going to change in case I ever get ransomware. Or, more lovely this, I can build a new volume with the system from scratch and make that volume encrypted there. No. When it comes to whether you're going to make your shared folders to be write once, read many, or you're going to make your volumes encrypted, neither of those are supported on the value end there. If we go in to the list of devices that support Worm and the list of devices that support volume encryption, seriously, there's not a J series or standard series box amongst them there. Now, maybe this will change retroactively. I don't think it will. But if you were thinking about upgrading to 7.2 for those immutable backups, be it for your snapshots, be it for your long-term storage, that is not going to happen here. So that is one reason to definitely not upgrade to 7.2. What about the rest of the features though? Because as mentioned, here is the page for the DS120j, and here is the page for the DS923. We've got 17 points of what's new, and we've got 17 points of what's new. But we already know now that write once, read many isn't available, and we also know that encryption isn't available on our device. So what about the rest of it? Well, I'm sad to say, pretty much anything you would consider lightly front end is not available here. So, for example, support of M2 SSD NVMe storage, unsurprisingly, given that practically, and I think I might be right in saying that no value series NASs support M2 NVMe SSD storage pools, or indeed M2 SSD bays, unsurprisingly, that's not available. And indeed, if we go into the storage manager here, although the status indicator is available and some of the background options are available, there isn't really anything. There's no mention of the encryption or the encryption locker. If we go to the overall storage area within Storage Manager and go to the global settings, there's the global settings there. Go in, it won't allow us. We're going to the settings. Nothing's really changed. It's all pretty much exactly what we saw. Now, how many of the background changes for compatibility or things that have changed in things like Synology Office that is going to be very much down to you and the supported file formats that you are going to use there. So we don't know the extent in which some of the collaboration suite and the upgrades that are detailed in Synology DSM 7.2 are factored into value series NASs. Now, I'm sure there's a number of you in the comments that are going to say, well, you're using a DS120j, the lowest of the low of the low. What about my DS420j? What about my DS418? And you're right. There are exceptions to this. If you're utilizing, for example, some of the later generation Realtek devices that have got at least 2 gig of memory, you already knew that you were able to take advantage of BTRFS. Some of those systems will also have support of Container Manager. Now, Container Manager is effectively a slight change in the front-end GUI of Docker that's always been available on Synology NAS systems, but unfortunately was never really available to the majority of ARM-based systems, with some incredibly small exceptions in the past. Now, Container Manager, this new redesigned front-end Docker from Synology there, it's still Docker, and they haven't released full pages detailing which systems support it yet. Even if you go to their Knowledge Center, like you can see here, and we search for Container Manager, if we select Container Manager, it still defaults directly over to the default Docker page there. So we still don't have the supported range of devices. And again, even if we go to the Docker page and see which NAS devices support it, that only applies to Docker when Container Manager is currently available on systems like the DS223, another lower end device, a much more modern release and modern Realtek CPU inside there. Ultimately, when we go to the package center here and we try to find Container Manager and we go through, we can go for container. As you can see there, it is not available. So unfortunately, lower end devices like this one are not going to have it. Again, there are exceptions, but I think that is something you're going to have to check by going into the release or the download section of your individual NAS. From there, going into a NAS such as the Essential Storage here, finding your NAS, go to the download section, such as, again, in the case of the DS223, go to the download section here, and then from the download section, you'll be able to identify which applications you can download locally, and particularly if you've got access to that container application. But just make sure you remember to select the DS 7.2 down tab there. But if we go back to that 120J, we can see the full range of those applications in beta or otherwise, and we'll be able to see of the packages what we have to play with here. And unsurprisingly, there isn't a lot to write home about. We don't have the container station or Docker there. We don't have anything of the slightly nuanced things of DSM 7.2 that weren't really container based. And ultimately, it means that our version of DSM 7.2 on the DS120 is really a light change. Now, some of the background stuff there, again, inline zero block, that is just not going to be possible on this device in its hardware architecture. We've already mentioned the status field is available there. Again, some of the warnings and notification changes and the way they're presented and how they have been implemented there, and some of the background stuff is just much harder for me to just put into the system in this bespoke setup that I have. Ultimately, and you can ignore the update fixes before anyone, I should say that right now, if you're considering 7.2 because you looked at this myriad of update fixes, do bear in mind that with the update and the fixes, a lot of these fixes have already been rolled into 7.1, and these updates and fixes are ones that have been moved over, that have occurred in 7.1 during the 7.2 beta phase and moved into the release candidate there. So as long as you continue with DSM 7.1 that you're using at the moment, you're going to be getting those updates, even if you're running DSM 6.2 to a degree. But ultimately, if you're running the really low end, there's no reason to upgrade. I don't think you lose anything by upgrading, that's fine, but just don't think you're upgrading to something more feature rich, because you won't be. It's a slightly different story for those in the middle of the pack. Again, the DS418, the DS218, the DS223, those devices do stand to gain. But until we see some more ARM affordable value series devices, a DS223J or 224J or maybe a 4-bay J or standard class series, until we start seeing those, we're not really going to see much movement on DSM 7.2 for the value series devices. And ultimately, as far as the 120J is concerned, the differences are very minimal and ultimately not worth upgrading if you don't want to, but you don't really lose anything by doing so either. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for bearing with me in a somewhat rambly video today, but this has been a question a lot of users have asked me with their lower end devices, whether to go to the release candidate or 7.2 in general. If you found this video helpful, do let me know in the comments. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. We've got links in the description to other DSM 7.2 videos and articles that we've made. And of course, if you want to support us, use the links in the description to any one of the retailers listed there. It costs you nothing extra. And if you found the video helpful and you're going to shop there anyway, what have you got to lose? And it results in a kickback that helps content creators like me and Eddie, just us here at NAS Compares, keep doing what we do. Use the free advice section, the Discord and the free community forum if you need more help. And I'll see you next time.